morning session, morning public hearing here in St. Paul. Thursday. We've seen a few hotels already this week and hearings, so we're here in St. Paul, and I've been to St. Paul about 15 years ago. I'm Justice Dallas Miller. I'm a trial judge in Medicine Hat. St. Paul's really easy to get to. We just drive to Tabor and turn left for 6 hours of Highway 36. So it's really easy to get to for us in Lethbridge. Welcome, and I do have a presentation or a summary introduction, and I typically go through all the Reader's Digest version of all the commissioners' files. However, there was some disconcerting news this morning, as it's already been alluded to. Rather than say anything negative about my colleague and fellow commissioner at the end of the table, I'll just let you go to the website and look at everybody's biographical details. But seriously, John Evans is from Lethbridge. He's a very experienced trial lawyer, and he does trials throughout the province, and but works out of his Lethbridge office. John has been recognized for his legal ability and given a King's Counsel Award, and he also volunteers on the Alberta Justice Nominating Committee.
And an Oilers fan.
And an Oilers fan, yes.
Just saying.
And to my immediate right is Susan Sampson from Sylvan Lake. And those of us from Lethbridge consider Sylvan Lake very central Alberta. And she has a tremendous amount of experience as a municipal politician, having served as councillor and mayor, and her volunteer efforts advocating for healthcare have been recognized by the award of the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal. To my immediate right is Dr. Julian Martin, historian, retired historian. Do historians retire? Okay, so he used to work at the University of Alberta. He's still a historian. And he volunteers on many committees in the Sherwood Park area where he lives, and serves on provincial tribunals such as the Right Court. At the very end was our dear friend Greg Clark, till we knew about his hockey proclivities. Greg is from Calgary, and he has the distinction of being the only former elected MLA in our commission, which is very valuable. He served for term representing Calgary Elbow, and now he is the chairman of the Balancing Pool of Alberta and consults widely with various organizations in terms of board governance. He has an MBA and an Institute for Corporate Directors designation. We are your Electoral Boundaries Commission. We are tasked with coming up with a report, and I'll talk to you about timelines here shortly, to deal with the redrawing of the electoral boundaries. One of the first tasks that we have, and it's a legislated task under our Act, the Electoral Boundaries Commission Act, is that we're moving from 87 electoral districts to 89. And just in terms of our timeline, as a commission, we were all appointed by the Speaker of the Legislature in late March. We met a couple of times in April as a commission, and then in May we started our public hearings, and we are going until June 23rd across the province, hearing submissions from various locations. Once we complete our public hearings, and based on the population data, the boundaries, the written submissions we received from the website, public hearings, we will work on our report, and we are mandated to have our what's known as an interim report filed with the Speaker of the Legislature by October 28th. Now that has come to be known as an interim report. Then members of the public, it'll become public. MLAs, members of the public, will then have an opportunity to respond to our interim report. We will have further public hearings, and then by late March 2026, we submit a final report to the Speaker of the Legislature, and the Legislature then deals with it as it will. And of course, you're aware that in Alberta, one MLA per constituency, and voters in each constituency elect MLAs. I've shown you a graph, and I will talk about population a little bit more, but for historic purposes, I want to reference the 2017 Electoral Boundaries Commission report. That report, that commission, based its report on a population that of just over 4 million people. That was in 2017. This year, we're basing this commission's report on a population of 4.88 million. How that works out in real life is you can see here. So the 2017 Electoral Boundaries Commission had 87 ridings to redraw. They took the population of 4,062,609, came up with a mean average of 46,697 people per riding. That's not the target. The target is the range 25 below and 25 above. So you see that range from just approximately 35,000 to just over 58,000. That was 2017. Our commission is using the figure 4,888,723 over 1,689 electoral districts. The mean average is 54,929, and the target range is therefore just over 41,000 to just under 69,000. That gives us flexibility, but not as much flexibility as you would think. Of course, the growth and population growth in Alberta has not concentrated on one particular area, it hasn't been spread evenly across the province, and it has concentrated largely in Calgary and Edmonton. Our task as a commission is to come up with a recommended list of 89 electoral districts that provide for effective representation. That is the term used in Canadian and Alberta electoral law to ensure that everyone is properly represented. To do that, we will consider several factors. And these are factors right out of the legislature. The relative sparsity and density of population across the province, common community interests and organizations, and we were really impressed with the submissions in Edmonton that focused to a great degree on community leagues, community associations within each riding within the city of Edmonton. We'll also be dealing with geographic factors, largely in urban context. Geography helps us guide, draw boundaries, but it does in the cities as well. Communication and transportation routes and lines across the province will also be used as factors in collecting boundaries. Our task as a commission is to come up with understandable and clear boundaries, and we're interested in hearing from people today as to how that might work in this area. And there's a final catch-all provision that we are allowed to take any other factors into consideration that we deem appropriate in designing the electoral district. So this is our public hearing in St. Paul. We want to hear from you. And that's the existing map of Alberta, showing 87 electoral divisions. In March of next year, we'll have a brand new map that Albertans can look at and refer to. So for our presentations, and we have lots of time this morning, so I'm going to call on Mr. Josh Crick to come forward and present first. Please identify yourself and...
Hello. It's working.
Good morning.
Good morning. Are you ready for me to go here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Yeah, so I don't even think they said I had 7 minutes, and then when I got here, it said 90 minutes. So I don't think I need anywhere near that much time.
You'd be surprised how time goes and how we keep you busy.
Yeah. So, anyways, first of all, I appreciate the job you guys are doing. It sounds like a lot of work. And my concerns are, I guess, some of the size of the boundaries of the constituencies. So I live between Bonnyville and Cold Lake, and I'm part of the Bonnyville, so I'm in the Bonnyville-Cold Lake constituency. It's quite a large geographical area with a lot of different councils So in our riding, we have the city of Cold Lake, we have the town of Bonnyville, the village of Glendon, the county of St. Paul, the town of St. Paul, the MD of Bonnyville, and there's also, I think, the Fishing Lake settlement, it was a Métis settlement, Cold Lake First Nations, Kihiwan, Frog Lake, and Saddle Lake. So that's a lot of councils and chiefs and councilors for the MLA to interact with. The MD of Bonnyville alone is 13,000 square kilometers. And I did a little bit of research last night on the computer. The city of Edmonton is just under 9,500 square kilometers. And there's about 20 MLAs in the city of Edmonton alone. And, you know, those MLAs have one council and mayor to work with. Often those MLAs in the city would have, there could even be two MLAs for one councilor in certain areas, whereas I just outlined how many councils and mayors and reeves and bands and stuff that our MLAs have to work with rurally. So, and then even just the driving requirements of the MLA for you talked about effective representation in your talk there. I can't imagine being an MLA trying to effectively represent this constituency, just with the amount of counties and school boards, hospital boards, and combine that with the geographical area and the driving time to get from one side to the other. So for me to come to St. Paul, you know, in my riding today was an hour and 5 minutes. And I don't live on the far edge, and St. Paul's not on the far other edge of the riding, so it might be 2 hours across. Whereas like in the city, you can probably ride a bicycle across in less than half an hour across a riding, right? So I just think we really need to take it into effect. All right, I'd hope that you guys would. I know you're all listening carefully to everything that's being said. So I'd really hope that you take into account, you know, just the effective representation and how the size and the amount of different counties and councils in this geographical area plays into effective representation. I think that's about all I really had to say. I told you it wasn't going to be long.
Okay. Where do you reside, sir?
I'm 3 miles east of Ardmore, which is 3 miles east of Ardmore. It's right in the middle between Bonnyville and Cold Lake.
Okay.
Yes, I'm in the MD of Bonnyville,
okay.
And I'm on council with the MD of Bonnyville.
Okay. And can I ask where your trade route is, or where do you shop and that kind of stuff? Where do you go regularly?
To both Bonnyville and Cold Lake. So I'm in Bonnyville every day, primarily because of, like, the MD has our administration office there, so that's where I work. And we go to church in Bonnyville, but Cold Lake is 15 minutes one way, Bonnyville's 15 minutes the other way, so, you know, wherever, go either place.
And St. Paul's an hour plus? Yes.
St. Paul is only if I have to come.
Okay. Okay. Tell me, you see the boundaries in, are you suggesting we change or amend these boundaries? And if so, how?
I guess I'm not sure exactly how. I leave that up to the experts.
Yeah.
I just, you know, I'm aware that you're allowed the 25% variance, right?
Yeah.
And I would encourage you guys to use that and to try and shrink the geographical size a bit. I'm not sure how that would play out. And the only other thing that I would mention, which is kind of contrary to everything else I've just said, is there's the little area where St. Vincent comes in, it's part of the county of St. Paul. It's that I've just, in talking to people that live in the area, I've heard that's kind of really weird that people that live 10 minutes out of St. Paul here are in a different riding.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not sure where a guy would take to adjust the size, even. But, you know, like there's, looking at the map, there's Saddle Lake, and then there's also the Frog Lake and Fishing Lake, the settlements. Those could be possible ways to readjust the size and population a bit.
Okay. Great. Any other comments? Great. Questions?
Yeah, I thank you for coming. And, you know, one of the privileges of being part of this commission, the opportunity to travel
Well, you're in one of the best areas.
But, I mean, you know, as you might have heard, I'm a tiny bit biased in my hometown. I love it. Like, I do love this part of the province. I mean, it's just different. Right? Like,
Yeah.
We were down last week, dry, flat, you know, just its own kind of natural beauty in its own way. It's just different, right? You kind of come up and then just, you know, more lakes, rivers, trees, you know, and we're just so lucky to live in Alberta. Like,
Yeah.
It is really a privilege to be able to see it all. And it also helps us get a sense of what must it be for your MLA and MLAs to travel these great distances and represent. So very, you know, empathetic and understanding that. And you know, your point on the sort of square kilometers of constituency, something like that, any urban center, I think I think the question is, and this is something we really grapple with. We've got a few kind of issues to balance, and one of them is just Alberta, unsurprisingly, has attracted a whole bunch of new people from outside the province. A lot of people come from Ontario and BC and all over the place, choosing to live in Alberta, and those people generally will arrive in Edmonton County. So as a result, those cities are really significantly growing in terms of their overall population. So we've got at least 7 constituencies that are more than 25% above. So we kind of by law, have to deal with that. So I guess that's the question I would ask you is any thoughts you have on how we kind of balance out, you know, and those urban MLAs we heard last week have other issues to deal with. You've got constituencies with people who speak 5, 6, 7 languages. You've got social serving needs. You know, your MLA will tell you there's some issues that urban MLAs tend to have to deal with. Don't rural and vice versa. Lots of issues in rural. So kind of a long question, but I guess I'm curious just how you feel we should think about that, balancing those two challenges.
So you're referring to balancing the different challenges that the urban MLAs have faced in multiple languages.
Yeah, I mean, well, and so really more just the population. The simple fact is we've got just a whole bunch of people who moved to Edmonton, a whole bunch of people who moved to Calgary, and so the population, some of those are like 80 or 90,000 people. Yeah. In the current. So, you know, we just, as you saw from the averages, we've got to get that down at least to under like mid-60s. Yeah. Right. So there's a need to add some consistency there, a little bit to work with. But I guess more the question kind of generally to you is, what would you say to the urban person who says, well, wait a minute, we're underrepresented ourselves because we just have so many people.
That's a good question. Right? Yeah. And I'll acknowledge that I live rurally, so I tend to think more rural. I would just think that those urban centers, they can have a slightly higher population per riding or constituency. I get 2 terms mixed up, based on that they're geographically quite close together, right? Like they're a lot smaller geographically, whereas we are quite large geographically. And I'm very well aware that the Bonnyville-Cold Lake constituency, Bonnyville-Cold Lake St. Paul, is not the largest rural constituency. There's some that are quite a bit larger, actually. That would be my answer, I think, just that they're like that. Another bit of information, I guess, that just kind of popped into my mind was, so the MD of Bonnyville, 30% of the province's oil royalties come out of the MD of Bonnyville. So, you know, economic impact can be something else to consider. We see, you know, from my own perspective, I see a lot of the funds for the province coming out of this riding, and I would say out of the one that Fort McMurray's in as well. And a lot of that money is going to the cities where, like you said, immigrants are coming in, people seem to be populating there. And as a result, the money comes from here and goes there, and like we don't have a single overpass in this riding, but yet 30% of our royalties come out of this riding. So the money's going from here and being transferred and building overpasses, and I realize that's maybe not necessarily an electoral boundary issue, but it's something to consider as well, that, you know, where the economic impact is coming from in the province too. Thank you.
Julian, any questions?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I'm really quite taken by your remark about the oil and gas revenue. I didn't realize that it was such a significant part of the province's take. And as a councillor on the MD, you must be affected by the leases as well, so you get a portion of revenues coming to you from the oil and gas operators in the region?
Yes, there is, the MD has a higher tax base than some counties, but it's definitely not for us to build overpasses without provincial government.
No, I didn't realize you needed overpasses, but
Well,
still.
you know, it's, for example, Highway 28, I don't know if you've traveled it.
Yeah.
And if you have time this afternoon, I would encourage you to go for a ride to Cold Lake and just, you know, if you see somebody driving straight on the highway, they might be drunk though because they're not swerving around all the holes. That's not a jab at our MLA. I know he's working on it.
Highway 28 produces the same effect near Redwater too, so.
Okay.
But no, seriously, my question was how extensive a footprint do you reckon the oil and gas patch is here? Does it extend as far south as the river, Saskatchewan?
I think it's spread out all over the whole constituency to a certain extent. The northern part up where the Cold Lake Air Weapons Range is, that would be where the majority of it is. But it comes like even where I live. So I'm right between Boyle and Cold Lake, and I have those big black tanks that are out in the fields. I have to drive by 90 of them just to get to the highway from my place. 90, yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
So, and I'm a mile and a quarter off the highway.
Wow, I love Alberta.
Yeah. So it's in the area, right? And that being said, like that, the question was asked to me, does the county get revenue from that? We do, but our roads also, you know, we're beat up, right? And we have road use agreements with the industry, but there's still just all the extra traffic and even the smaller industry, right? We have to use a lot of that money to maintain the road system.
Well, my sort of an adjacent question is about new oil and gas related employment. Do you see a growth of that plus families? I mean, it's one thing to have guys come in to do construction like was the case 20 odd years ago, but are you now in a mode where it's just management and operations? Or are you still growing the number of people working in oil and gas?
Yeah, when the oil price crashed 2015, it kind of did go back. There was a bit of a recession here, and it went back to more of a management thing. But lately, the last three years or so, it's been expanding quite a bit. They've been drilling new wells. So like the 90 tanks that I referenced when I drive by, those are all new in the last 3 or 4 years.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
And there is a certain element of people coming into work, absolutely. But somebody only comes so much to work before they bring their family, right? Yeah. So we're seeing lots of people moving into the area, especially in the Cold Lake area. Yeah.
No, good presentation, and I have to echo my colleague. I understand what you're saying when you talk about access to your MLA and access to the region and how difficult it is because it's so large. How often would you, as a councillor, see your MLA?
Not counting today.
Not
counting today. I don't know the answer to that. I was going to use the term poor representation, but I think our MLA does a fantastic job, and I don't know how he even has enough time in a day to do all the work that he does.
Right.
Yeah, he works hard. He gets around, but like I said, I don't know how he can do it. I have 4 kids at home, and I feel like my family would be aliens if I had that job. So I don't know how he does it. Okay. Sorry, that's not really an answer to your question as to how often I see him. Yeah, you know, and I think it'd be different as me for a county councillor seeing it because I'm going to different things like this or different events or functions.
That you bang into him more than he's actually, you know, on official business coming to your county council or you're booking an appointment with his office. And
yeah, I think he's showed up to 2 of our council meetings since he's been elected, and he maybe more. He can correct me. He might keep track. Just to show up, so that's good for him, right? He's got a lot of councils to go to.
Yeah.
Plus, the work of being an MLA.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You can see on the map of the reddish colored, areas. And those would be Métis settlements or
Yeah.
Indian reservations. Can you tell me, what's your sense of the connection, you know, with those within this electoral district and amongst themselves? For example, Saddle Lake and Fishing Lake and Elizabeth and Keewan.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with Saddle Lake. Like
Too far.
the odd time I come to St. Paul for something if I have to, and I've never had to go to Saddle Lake for anything. I did work a little bit on Frog Lake Reserve, teaching a shop class out there until COVID happened. I don't think they all have convenience stores on reserve, I think, but they don't have grocery stores and a lot of the amenities that we have in town. So the residents of the reserves and settlements do come into town all the time for everything. And you see that every here in St. Paul or Palm Lake, Montego. I'm not sure if that's answering your question or if you...
I just want to know, if you're aware of, you know, how integrated they are with each other and...
Yeah, I can't say I'm really overly aware of that, no.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your presentation and the information you provided.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very helpful. Josh, you took up 15 minutes. I told you the time goes fast.
my presentation was only 1 minute. It was over 14.
Just a couple of clarifications. Are you employed by the county or are you a county councillor?
County councillor.
Okay, and you farm then?
Well, I'm a carpenter by trade.
Oh, okay.
So, but I don't have a lot of time for doing construction work at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, my wife is a speech therapist.
Okay.
And she actually works on some of the reserves. She works at Frog Lake and Beaver Lake.
Okay.
So she drives up to Laklabish every week and she drives to Frog Lake every week.
Okay. Have there been times when, for your county duties or events or meetings, where you reached out and wanted your MLA to come and he couldn't come? Have you had situations like that because of his schedule conflict?
Events, yes. I think he makes, like I said, he does a great job. He works hard. If we need something done, then, you know, we can wait a couple weeks or,
okay,
you know, wait till he's in the area.
So if you're flexible, you can get him to events.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, you know, there's definitely lots of events I go to that the MLA is not there because he can't be in two places at one time, right? Canada Day, for example, he can't be in St. Paul and Montego at the same time and Cold Lake, all three at the same time. You might make it two or three in the same day if there's different times. Okay. Can't be everywhere.
Okay, and I just want to comment, and I could be corrected by my historian here, but the terminology the legislation uses is electoral division.
Okay.
And in popular parlance, we talk about constituencies or ridings or electoral district. But riding, my understanding, the way we arrived at the word riding was in Britain, and when Parliament was going, it took a day to ride a horse across a district, and then it just became a riding. That's the terminology. Does that sound right?
That's true. It's Anglo-Saxon, actually.
Yeah.
So the term has stuck around an awful long time.
Yeah. So.
How long did it take you to ride a horse across Molly?
3 days.
We're going to have the MLA then. Okay, well, thank you very much, Josh. And if you can stay, please stay, because after the next presentations, we may want to continue the conversation.
Okay, I will stay. Thanks.
Thank you.
It's a long drive back home.
Yeah, that's a nasty question. I'm just lucky I knew the answer.
Yeah.
It's a story in the morning or something.
Okay, Mr. Sear.
Thank you, Justice Miller. I appreciate you taking, and the entire commission. I'd like to read something into the record, if that's fine.
Sure.
and then we can go into your questions. So, it won't be long. It's not a half an hour diatribe here. And so, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I want to begin with expressing my sincere appreciation for the hard work you're doing to ensure fair and effective representation to all Albertans. Your task is not easy. I commend the care and professionalism with which you are approaching it. On May the 22nd, I submitted a formal proposal outlining recommended changes to the Bonnyville-Cold Lake St. Paul constituency. I submitted this through both your website and email, and to ensure that you've received it in full, and I'd like to briefly speak to the reasoning behind it here today. Our constituency is significantly overpopulated. Based on the 2021 census data, and excluding the on-reserve First Nations people, we are already exceeding the 25% upper limit of the permitted under the Elections Boundary Commission Act. Factoring in the more recent growth of the incoming families related to the F-35 program and Four-Wing Cold Lake and the Cold Lake oil sands, the real-world service populations could be reaching up to 75,000 by the end of the decade. This effectively creates a serious challenge to representing this population effectively. We're also the home of a large number of rotational oil and gas workers who use local infrastructure but aren't counted in the federal numbers. They are known as shadow population. Municipal affairs allows for shadow populations to be counted in local censuses, yet in reality is invisible in the electoral redistributions. Nevertheless, it impacts schools, hospitals, roads, and my office daily. To help restore balance, I'm proposing the western boundary of Bonnyville-Cold Lake St. Paul be realigned to follow the full legal boundaries of the MD of Bonnyville, the County of St. Paul, including ID 349. This proposal would transfer Saddle Lake Cree Nation into the Athabasca Barhead West Lock and reintegrate the northwest corner of the County of St. Paul, resolving confusion that arose among voters during the last election. I take no pleasure in recommending the removal of any part of my constituency. It is tough to come up with some balance here, particularly Saddle Lake, whose residents I deeply value. However, every Albertan deserves fair and effective representation. This adjustment would reduce the constituency's total population based on the 2021 figures to approximately 55,700. This would also bring it within the legal threshold for a time being and strengthen representation for all communities, including Saddle Lake. We are a rural constituency. We are growing. Our economic future is strong and our population is expanding. What we need now is an electoral boundary that reflects the growth and ensures every voice is fairly represented. Thank you again for this opportunity to present before you today and for your continued service to the people of Alberta.
Thank you. There's going to be some questions, and Aaron, can you just read the population figures? I can't read them.
It's for 2016 and 53,809, and 2024 53,700.
Okay, so that's the figure. Your report or presentation had some different figures.
Agreed.
And so I think we should have a conversation about those figures. And let me start on the far end. Mr. Evans, are you ready for a question? At some point, we've got to have a conversation about the population.
Agreed. Which is where I had broke that down, Mr. Sorry.
Yeah.
Where those numbers came from on the third page of my presentation. Now, again, I accept that when it comes to these numbers, again, if the commission's got better numbers than I have got, then I will readjust my presentation. But this is based on the research my office has done. So again.
Okay. Well, let me, on behalf of the commission, I'm not saying our numbers are better. I'm saying we're relying on the 2021 census, which the Act requires us to do. But the Act also has some supplementary sections that says roughly translated, updated as best as Alberta can. And it does make reference to a province-wide census or municipal censuses. We haven't had that, as I understand it, but the Alberta Treasury Board, through its Office of Information and Statistics, does a tremendous amount of work of continually verifying numbers as they get them from the feds. And to say that the feds do a census in 21 and don't do anything till 26 is not accurate. They do constant number crunching and verification. So in a very clumsy way, I'm trying to explain how we get at our numbers, and I think that's something we need to have a more fulsome discussion on. But anyway, because yours are higher than ours.
I have a question.
Yeah. Okay.
I wonder, is here, and again, good to see you, thanks for taking notes on it. Just, if you look at this map, and the, is the entirety, sorry, let me just get on this, the entirety of each of the listed, jurisdiction within the Bonnyville, like St. Paul, so specifically, is all of County of St. Paul and all of MP of Bonnyville within your constituency, or does that constituency boundary, slice some of that off?
So if you refer to the map, sorry, again, going back to my presentation here. It's like page, I don't know.
3.
With the colored areas?
Well, it's the better one is the third last page.
Okay.
Wouldn't go as
Thanks.
So, okay, so we see. Okay.
So you can see where it's confusing for people. That green part is the only part that is not for the county of St. Paul that's not within my constituency. What I will say is that when people that are in the county of St. Paul, they assume that because the name of my constituency is Bonnyville, Cold Lake, St. Paul, that suddenly they fit within my constituency. And I'm expected to go to a lot of these municipalities like the Ashmonts, the Lakes, all that. They're asking why is their MLA not present at their functions? Haying in the 30s would be one of the big ones. Again, I try to make it out to them because I'm trying to help out my neighboring MLA as much as I possibly can. But there's confusion because of that. And it didn't add a lot of population to my constituency by adding this. I think it's 1,500. No, it was even less than that. So when we're looking at this, it just makes sense that we would add the entirety of the county of St. Paul. But the problem is I'm already right at the top of the population maximum. Even with the way you guys are calculating, it sounds like 53,000.
The current average is 55.
Yeah. We're already almost right at the top there. Now, one of the things that it needs to be recognized in all of this is that this is my second boundary commission that I've sat before. The first one was a difficult one, and the reason was that with the collapse of the oil, price of oil, I had almost every one of my communities, at that time it was only Bonnyville, Cold Lake, but in my communities within the Bonnyville, Cold Lake, confusing. It was the Bonnyville, Cold Lake constituency before. They added Elk Point, St. Paul, and Saddle Lake to my constituency after the redistribution. Mm-hmm. Now, what happened was that we saw a collapse of my entire region for the oil and gas sector, which meant I had almost every third or fourth house up for sale in my constituency, which was unusual. What we had before in 2014, we were renting out couches for $1,000 a month. Mm-hmm. The shadow population was obscene back then, and which is why we went from one of the smallest constituencies, the minus 25 to the plus 25 when they did the redistribution with that. Now, we're not looking at a collapse in oil anymore. I will say that for my oil and gas industry, when it comes down to it, I think government policy has held us back. whether it's our current administration down in the United States that's causing some turmoil right now. Our federal government was also bringing in emission caps and different ways of curtailing our oil and gas production. What happens here is it looks like our Prime Minister has more of an appetite to work with us. So should that happen with Prime Minister Carney, and should the President of the United States suddenly decide that he wants to see our oil, and he's been very supportive of the Keystone Pipeline, then we're going to see a boom happen again up in my area like we haven't seen before. So we're going to see a massive shadow population suddenly materialize like we had in 2014. So we have challenges that are unique to our area. Now, when you add the F-35s, we're looking at more than $1 billion, $1.5 billion in the Cold Lake.
Okay, talk to us about that. I've heard reference to it, but we're curious to know a little bit more about the industry and how that impacts you, right?
So we're going to see at its height about 1,000 construction workers coming into work on that. They're looking at 2030 is when we're likely going to have a lot of construction done. They're ramping up this July, so it's starting. We just went out to the two big prime contractors, Bird and Ellis Donna. But that 1,000 workers is likely going to be brought in from Eastern Canada for the large part, because we don't have the capability to be able to build something this. We don't have the subtrates to be able to keep up with our.
And what kind of skills do these workers? Engineers,
some of it's engineers, but a lot of it is cement, your builders, you name it. All of the sub-trades are going to be needed. What we're doing here with the F-35s is just a remarkable amount, and it's supposed to be 7 to 10 years that they're working on the F-35 and getting that one up and going. So you put that as well as the growth in the oil sands, and we also, Prime Minister Carney is also looking at the Pathways project. That's the carbon capture. The carbon capture up in our area is, we're actually we have a unique geology right under our seats here in St. Paul, where they're going to be injecting the CO2 should this move forward. So we're actually the destination of where they're going to be potentially putting all the CO2. So that is about a $16 to $18 billion project from Fort McMurray all the way down to here. You put that all together, and it's going to have rapid growth. I've been working with our ministers, health, education, post-secondary, saying, how can we get in front of this? Because it's coming. We know it's coming.
So as an old colleague used to say to me, there's two kinds of problems, good problems and bad problems. Looks like you've got some good problems coming.
We have remarkable talent here, and opportunity. The fact is, we're likely going to be one of the foremost Air Force bases in the world after the F-35 program gets to Cold Lake. We're one of two locations for the F-35s, and we're having the larger number of planes up in our constituents. The aerospace program actually is going to be taking off out of Cold Lake. We've got permission to start that program as well, just because of the fact that we have so many trained military and former military to be able to bring in the drone technologies and we're looking at training pilots, you name it, up here. Like, it's just we have so much to offer Alberta from our area. Mm-hmm. The problem is that I'm only one man, and trying to get to everywhere where I need to advocate effectively is going to be difficult with everything that's happening.
Who's the MP?
Sorry?
Who's the MP?
I have two MPs. I have MP Stubbs and MP Goodrich, both good MPs. The boundary is Highway 55, north and south. That's pretty much where that is. I work closely with both my MPs trying to deal with this, but recognizing that their electoral districts are significantly larger, and I recognize That's got to be a challenge for them as well. But again, municipalities really are under the province's domain, if you will. So when there's a need for something specific, healthcare, education, supports for our justice system, that comes for the MLA really advocating on their behalf. Susan?
I have a couple of questions. Yesterday, when we were in Westlock and we were discussing with the MLA there some changes I just want to clarify in my own mind. The electoral district of 49 is underpopulated. It's sitting at 46,782. And if you remember, we're kind of working around 55,000 plus or minus 25%. And so would it be reasonable to suggest that the county of St. Paul that's divided move into Athabasca Barrhead, or because of the naming of the county, that it is the county of St. Paul? Is it better off in your riding? And also, are the trade routes more aligned in your riding than they are being in the Athabasca Barrhead? Did I explain that well enough?
You did a very good job.
Thank you.
So I have already sat with MLA Van Dyken to discuss this, recognizing that there's not a lot of population in the green section that you saw there, but there is more. Here I'm complaining about getting to everywhere, and I'm saying please add more to my constituency. The problem that I've got is that in the end, there's confusion that comes along with that. Now, again, when it comes to Saddle Lake, that's about 6,000 people. It's the second largest First Nation reserve in Alberta, and that is I guess for maybe one of the concerns you bring forward. It'll bring some population to MLA Van Dyken's constituency and can help balance that out a little bit more. But again, when you're looking at Saddle Lake, they do rely on a lot of the services from the town of St. Paul. There's no disputing that. The problem is that if we start using that criteria, then you should be including Lac La Biche, Two Hills to my constituency. Suddenly you're at 100,000 people. So where do you draw that line? I don't have a good answer there. I will say though that when it comes to the former boundary commission, they were only focused on population.
That's correct.
And we likely, I sat with them in both meetings before and after, and I was saying that you were making Bonnyville Cold Lake something that was an anomaly when you're looking at rural, because we have such a high concentrated population when it comes to my constituency. At that time, they had only added Elk Point and St. Paul, and they had left the Saddle Lake Reserve off of the first initial drawing. So I went and sat with them and said, look, you've added 50% more land to Bonnyville Cold Lake, which is again my former constituency, and you've added almost I think made it, I would say, added another 50% or 60% more population to the constituency. And then what happens is after the redistribution, they added Saddle Lake. So that threw it right over the top. And again, I love all of my constituency. I'm not suggesting that I would want to lose any of them because I've become attached to every community. But again, we need to be looking at is this adequate? Is an MLA able to adequately be able to represent us? And I definitely get to everywhere. One of the first things I had done was open offices inside of, we only had one office in Bonnyville, and I opened up a Cold Lake office, an Elk Point office, and St. Paul office. To be able to I travel to where the people are, not traveling where I am. But you can see that means that I'm in my car a lot. And that's fine. I signed up for the job, and I accept that mileage is part of my mandate. But
Just have two more. I just want to explore the satellite question a bit more. When I look at the neighboring riding again of 49, because it was just yesterday, again, that's the Athabasca Barhead. I was thinking of Saddle Lake, and we've been talking prior to this consultation about communities of interest that come together like communities. So I use the reference of transportation, and I agree with you, that in itself is not enough. It's the whole package we're looking at. You have significant other Indigenous Métis areas in your riding. Is that of concern that we would pull Saddle Lake out? Do they, at this part, I don't know. I don't have experience. Is there cultural functions? Is there that kind of thing? I'm stumbling around here.
what does the leadership of Saddle Lake say?
Yeah.
Well, again, when it comes to the leadership of Saddle Lake, I think that for the most part, they consider themselves to be federal.
Federal, thank you.
And when it comes to Saddle Lake, they're more concerned with the MPs than they are with the MLAs.
Good to know.
Good point. That doesn't mean that when the council doesn't request, and again, I send out regular requests to sit with the council, but what they are really after is ensuring that they have opportunities to be able to get into post-secondary, which we have Blue Quills, and I'm very thankful for that. And that one there is a remarkable source for them, and that's just outside of St. Paul. They've got a lot of their own schools right on the First Nation there as well. There's some schools that they bus out to in St. Paul as well. But when it comes down to it, I would say that our First Nations, again, when it comes to how connected, our region, I guess we'll step back. One of the things I had the blessing of is having the Premier up to my constituency. And she's got a vision for rural of a hub and spoke model where you got your hubs and you kind of feed in for services into the different major center, if you will. We don't have a hub in our area. We've got a cluster, if you will, and it's all clustered throughout. So a hub and spoke model isn't going to work very well unless you make St. Paul the hub, which means that you cut out most of my constituency out of that. I would say that when you look at our region, we're a lakeland region, and we're integrated in all of the Northeast out of necessity. Two Hills is we have people going down to Two Hills for healthcare. We've got Lac La Biche, which we do dialysis, like you name it. So when you move that entire region, we're well over 100,000 people, and I don't know how you. It's like having a city that's spread out. Usually, you would break that into two and have two MLAs to be able to service that. And the question is, where do you draw that line? Because it's going to affect parts of each side of, say, Red Deer. If they looked at Red Deer, we'll use them as a good example. You're going to have some in Red Deer North or Red Deer South using each other's healthcare or justice or education. That's the same thing here. We're integrated. Our AHS works remarkably well. Our school system, I got five school divisions in my constituency. So, like, you name it, we've got lots happening here, and they all work well together because they have to. We have no choice.
Just one small point, and thank you for those explanations. I understand that in your submission to us, you're asking for the weapons area to be included in the boundary, and I'm just not clear on that. I think it already is in the boundary.
It is. I just want to highlight that
Okay,
it is something that is, the only real access to the air weapons range is through to the south side of the air weapons range. This was controversial before, because they want to keep lumping the air weapons range in other areas.
I get
So,
it, yeah.
I haven't heard any of the other proposals, but if there are other proposals, suggesting that the air
Yeah.
weapons range should be moved away from Bonnyville Cold Lake, that would be probably very impactful for our area.
Good, and I'm glad you clarified that because, it's a natural fit. And I support that opinion of yours.
Right. It was the right decision the Boundary Commission made in the first, 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I wholeheartedly agree with that decision. Again, there's some things I disagreed with the prior commission on, but in this case, they got it right.
Thank you for answering and the clarification.
Before I move to Dr. Martin, where do you live in the riding?
I live in Cold Lake. Yeah.
Julia?
Thank you. And thank you especially for your submission, which I read with great interest, and it's good to have another copy that is clean. The other one is all marked up now. But really what I marked up were several themes that we've already touched on today, really. One is about the shadow population and its impact, just as you might put it, impact without taxation. And because they use services but aren't really connected to the payment of them, which is a burden. Secondarily, you rightfully have expectation of growth, both economic growth and consequent population from oil and gas revival, new techniques associated with it, especially, as you say, with the carbon capture initiative, and then, of course, the air base. I think the F-35s will succeed, finally, and you've already been doing a fair bit of pre-planning around that, I take it. But they are going to come, and I'm interested in these sort of growth stories because anyone could talk about things might grow in the future, sort of, kind of, but it's most persuasive for us if it's imminent and tangible. And I think you have persuaded me that that is the case with the projects you've spoken of vis-a-vis population. So you're growing. You're growing in two directions. That is to say, you're growing with people who come and pay taxes and live in the houses and use the shops. And you are growing yet again with shadow population, which is and I wanted to touch as well on the where the oil and gas zone is. Mr. Crick suggested that it is in the center and north part of the current riding. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it depends on what type of oil you're talking about.
Yeah.
So we've got your heavy oil, which is in the north, which is where you need to use
SAG.
SAG-D is typically steam agitated is usually to go there. But we also have the cold flow. So as you move south, where they just pump it slowly out of the ground because it's able to flow. And then you've got conventional further down by the St. Paul and Elk Point areas. So the further you get from the north, the lighter the crude gets, if you will. And a lot of the conventional stuff is probably been tapped into and
Mature.
Mature. Thank you. That's a very good way of putting it. Whereas our heavy oil, we've got 50 or 100 years of oil ready to be taken out of there. So there's a lot of opportunity for still getting some real heavy oil out of the ground. And as we continue to look at our technology, we're finding better and better ways of getting that oil out of the ground. and environmentally sensitive. Some of our pads, we've got Imperial that has a pad that's got 70% reduction in emissions. They're doing everything they can to bring their emissions down, and they're doing a very good job of it.
I don't want to, well, yes, I do want to interrupt, because you're explaining what we both agreed is the case.
Yep.
And your submission does a good job of that. And as I say, I'm persuaded you have growth, and for any number of reasons, that is sustainable. I want to ask a rather different question, and that is with respect to the Métis settlements. Now, how you suggested that the satellite, for example, orientates itself mostly towards its federal relationships, and what about the Métis settlements?
Well, so we've got Elizabeth settlement and Fishing Lake settlement in my constituency. I will say that when it comes to them, trying to find that balance, because it is under provincial jurisdiction, it's an awkward one that our settlements have got. So they own the structure on the property, but they don't actually own the land that the property is on.
Crown land?
Well, I think it's
Métis settlement land. That's a creature on its own.
Yeah.
Creature of its own, yeah.
So
Individuals can't own it.
So a lot of it comes down to, they just want services. One of the opportunities that we saw was the opening of the scope with our nurse practitioners. That was quite remarkable for our First Nations and settlements. It is difficult to get doctors up in north. That is just a fact. They all want to see the congregate in the larger metropolitan centers, Edmonton and Calgary. And again, I welcome any doctor, no matter where they're at. There's a shortage of it. But the nurse practitioners is a real. I think it's the best way of delivering care for the Northeast. And in this case, they're asking for nurse practitioners to be put in into clinic spaces inside of onto my settlements, and that's a good ask. Why wouldn't we want to explore that? Now, don't me wrong. If I got a doctor that is willing to go into my settlements, that would be ideal as well. But in the end, that's one thing that we need to be very on top of. And I am working closely with health to see where we can get this happening. But that's a blossoming new field. This clinics for nurse practitioners. So trying to get them to grow up here, but. I will say that when it comes down to it, they're just asking for a level of service on the settlements. Having us look at their schools, a lot of we'll use Fishing Lake and Elizabeth settlement. A lot of them bus their children to Cold Lake. That just because of the school, they're trying to get it into that school system. Now, the Northland School Division is doing a fabulous job, but they're limited in resources, and I've been advocating on their behalf to try to make sure that the Northlands is heard, because really the Northland School Division, if you think I'm big, my God, the amount of area the Northland School Division covers is something that's mind-blowing, really. So the answer is that different challenges, but you're not wrong. My settlements do need more of my time, or they all need my time, but we have more influence over our settlements than we would over of our First Nations.
Thank you.
Hopefully that answers your question.
It's very helpful.
Yeah.
I have a. Oh, go ahead. Immediate? Yeah. You skipped me. Oh, sorry. Okay. I got usurped by a plane stand. That's okay. It happens. Yeah.
Here we go.
So I want to know your opinion on the connectivity between St. Paul and Two Hills, and comparing that to St. Paul and Bonnyville, and then comparing that moving west from St. Paul.
So again, I would say that our entire northeast region is connected. St. Paul, so something that I didn't know when, from my first, because just to give you a little bit of history about myself, because it's relevant here. I was elected from 2015 to 2019, and then I decided to step back from politics in 2019 and threw my hat back into the ring way back in 2023, was successful there. So I've got a gap here, if you will, a term. Now, my first term was Bonnyville Cold Lake. We didn't have St. Paul in it. Now, since I've started my second term, what I didn't realize is St. Paul is the center of almost all the Northeast services for everything. Your RCMP, you name it, it's centered out of St. Paul.
Judicial Center for King's Bench.
The whole works, everything. And that has opened up a remarkable access to services that I didn't have before, and again, it's not that I couldn't have phoned them up, but you're very cautious on dealing in other MLAs, constituencies, again. So once I found out how connected St. Paul was, but I didn't think that there was any real connections between Bonnyville, Cold Lake, and St. Paul. But when you turn St. Paul into the hub for the Northeast, suddenly it's all interconnected in ways that you couldn't have anticipated, which is what's happened here. And that's why
That's governmental connections and services, but I'm talking, and I agree with that. It puzzles me, because I don't know that there's the community connection in the same way. Would you agree with that?
I would say that that is an argument that I had made to the first boundary commission. So that I didn't see those connections as strong as what they were making that out to be.
Can you
That's the
expand on
community
that?
interest aspect that the legislation now allows us to look at. That's what I'm really interested, that's what I'd like to drill down.
So at that time, they were only about population.
Right.
There was no other consideration. And when I had talked about how the connectivity and all this stuff, they weren't interested in any of this discussion. And when I brought it up, one of the commission members said, "You know what Skype is?" That's a strange thing that when I was saying it'd be difficult to get through to all of my areas. But what I will say though, that when it comes to our areas, with St. Paul, I would say you've got a cluster here of two hills, St. Paul, the Saddle Lake, the Hewin, likely even Elk Point would be one cluster. Then you've got the Bonnyville Cold Lake and maybe Lac La Biche cluster, if you will. But Lac La Biche goes either way to Bonnyville Cold Lake or to St. Paul. Again, trying to treat them as if they're independent of each other would be a mistake, because we're all interconnected. Everything. Well, like, mental health is driven, and government services matters. Like we can't discount just because you don't drive to Walmart in Cold Lake from St. Paul. You're still driving to Cold Lake for, say, the doctor that you're trying to see, or vice versa. It could be that you've got a Cold Lake resident that's driving to St. Paul for a specialist here. And we do have the mental health that is being driven out of St. Paul. So there's certain areas that are centers of excellence, if you will, and that's something that I take pride in. And it's good to see that my region is working so well together. Is it perfect? The answer is no. I'm working on that, and I continue to work on that. But in the end, the government services, I think, is integral to show how important it is that we're tied together. And separating that is problematic.
Let me ask you one more question about your projected growth, and regardless of whether you say our numbers are right or your numbers are right, it doesn't, like, what I'm more interested in is the trend. And I think we can agree that it certainly looks like it's going to trend up. What I want to know is, in your opinion, is your boots on the ground, how quickly is it going to trend up? And what kind of increase are we going to be looking at over that time? And why that's important is because another commission is not going to be looking at this electoral boundary for another 8 to 9 years. So between now and then, if I knew that your population was going to double,
my suggestion as one of the commissioners would be that we would do something drastically different than what we're talking about right now with this particular electoral district. Does that make, well, I'm not saying that's the case, but it's illustrative of the principles.
So what I see from the first boundary commission, and here, I'm not here to take right hooks at another boundary commission, but they wanted to get rid of a constituency in rural, so they could add it to one of the metropolitan areas. And at that time, we had Lac La Biche, St. Paul, Two Hills. An awkward.
That's a weird one.
It was. But they just completely annihilated that constituency and then stuck all of the neighboring areas into the surrounding constituencies. So they got rid of their constituency. If you're asking, should there be another constituency in Northeast, I would say likely this is something that needed to be explored. But I can tell you that as the MLA for Bonnyville, Cold Lake, St. Paul, I take pride in all of my communities, and I will fight for every one of them, and I will continue to do that. It is difficult for me to say that I would like to set maybe we need to start making some decisions, because right now with shadow populations, I'm anticipating that we could end up with my constituency being at close to 100,000. And by 2030, we're by the projections that we're able to see, we're probably going to be anywhere from 72 to 77,000 in actual population.
My thinking is more in line with, rather than, you don't have to make another constituency. You could make this constituency of 15-2, right? So a very small constituency in numbers, knowing that it's going to increase in size based on population growth. So whether it's 5 years or 9 years, when you come to review again, you're spot on with that thinking that it should be exactly on parity with other constituencies in the population.
So my Bonnyville, Cold Lake, my former constituency was one of the four small ones. Because everybody understood that we were the ones that were growing. Now, when the first boundary commission went through this, we had a collapse of my entire region,
right?
Just because of the oil and gas, right? And at that time, we had almost saw all military funding collapse underneath the federal Liberal government. So you put the two together, and I had a real hardship. I had people crying in my office weekly about losing their homes. It was awful what was going on for our area. Having said that, we moved past that, and we're seeing some real light, and we're seeing a lot of the same things we were seeing in 2014 before the collapse. If the collapse hadn't happened in 2015, I have no doubt that I could have justified to the prior boundary commission that making changes the way they had was going to oversize this constituency. But they were saying that the first boundary commission was, I was going to shrink. That was their projections based on it. We were going to see.
When you say the first boundary commission, you mean the first report of the 16-17?
Yes.
Yeah.
They actually had us as a declining constituency, which, based on the information of that at that second, that was correct. But they weren't looking at they were more or less thinking that oil would be stuck in the ground, the military base would never see any growth ever again. I had a hard time jumping to that conclusion, but and again, history has shown that they've been wrong. But again, we don't know how this is going to work out perfectly.
That's right.
I've got estimates, projections, but whether they work out or not, it's a different story.
One last question, I promise. Tell me about your thinking in terms of the spillover of this population growth that we're talking about here in this electoral division, but how much is going to spill over into Lac La Biche?
So the way this works is that Cold Lake clearly is going to be the epicenter of growth in my constituency.
Okay.
Just because it's the bedroom community where everybody wants to live. Every part of my constituency is beautiful in its own way. But I will say that Cold Lake is focused on the recreation, if you will, of residents. So people are attracted to there. Now, we're already seeing Cold Lake pull the alarm bell saying that they have to start subsidizing, building right now. That's how worried they are, because we're gonna start seeing our rents go to the point where there's no affordable housing left in Cold Lake. But what happens is it's already starting to fill up in Cold Lake. It spills out to Bonnyville. Once Bonnyville is full, then it spills out to St. Paul, Elk Point, Glendon, and then back to Lac La Biche. So right now, we haven't seen Bonnyville starting to fill up yet, but I can tell you that I'm already hearing that it used to be in 2014, to give an example, people were buying houses sight unseen.
In Bonnyville.
In Cold Lake.
Okay.
Like, it was so crazy back then.
What about Bonnyville? Same.
Bonnyville was in the same boat, and we were starting to see subdivision. Now,
What about Lac La Biche?
Lac La Biche, again, I'm not as familiar because it wasn't my constituency, but I do know that there's some impacts. But one of the things that I think that should be mentioned here that we haven't touched on yet is we have some sizable camps up here.
Shadow population.
Those camps that feed into these oil and gas industry, right? And
Are
so
they on the base?
well, there's going to be a camp on the base, for sure. But for the most part, people, when they're here for anywhere from 7 to 10 years, are going to want to move their family here. So it'll be a temporary thing. But we're talking Synovus, like the oil and gas industry, you've got camps. Now, I know that right now, there's a press to find out what the balance for these camps are. If they're emptying our municipalities out, that is not helpful for Albertans. Plus, they're living in jurisdictions outside of Alberta, for the most part, which means they're not tax paying Alberta. So they're using our services while they're here, but they're not paying any taxes. That is problematic. And then again, I'm not here to take shots at the rest of Canada. I want them to succeed, but I also need to make sure our municipalities are able to grow at a reasonable path as well. So one of the things that I know that Minister Jean has been, Minister of Energy is saying, is that we need to revisit how we're bringing these camps in. These camps were brought in 2014 out of necessity. Okay, let's find balance. Let's give our municipalities the ability to grow responsibly, and still, if the oil companies need camp workers, then we can work through that as well. But there's a real balancing act that I'm hoping that we can do better than we did in 2014.
Julian, did you ask?
I'm fine. I mean, I'm glad you brought up the shadow population issue yet again. I won't belabor it, but it's obviously a significant feature in any discussion about planning in your zone. Thank you.
Just really quickly, and then again, there's just tremendous value in having you here, and your local knowledge and context is incredibly helpful. So I did just want to ask, you'd mentioned you had a number of constituency offices. One of the things that's come up in past conversations, and pretty much every past Boundaries Commission report I could find, is, hey, perhaps we should have some more budget for rural MLAs. That not as the only way to deal with it, but as another layer, acknowledging the scale. It's a simple reality of geography in Alberta is you're going to have large rural constituencies no matter what you do. Is there a need, would it be helpful to have more budget so you could open more satellite offices, hire more staff, and perhaps better serve your constituents?
I will say that I'm stretched right to the max of my budget every year. And again, with the standard, we're negotiating some large increases to the staff at our constituency offices, because again, it's all outside of my ability to be able to budget their increases. And they deserve it. They're hardworking. But the answer here is that you can't hand us 50,000, 60,000 people to manage in such a large geographic area, and not give us the ability to be able to address that. If they can't see me personally, and that's the one thing that I guess the first Boundary Commission didn't recognize, is that they thought we could rural was the same thing as big metropolitan Edmonton and Calgary. In metropolitan Calgary and Edmonton, it's likely a phone call or a Skype, if you will, is probably what they're looking for. But in rural, it's not the case. They want to see, the farmer literally wants me to come and see the culvert on his property that's not draining right. That's not a real problem that and I'm not suggesting they don't have their own challenges, not at all. The one thing you brought up that hadn't occurred to me was the many languages that they're dealing with, the language barriers that comes with our big metropolitan. So I'm saying different challenges. But for ours, we've got, I don't know, 30 or 35 different councils that I'm dealing with. Like, that's your summer villages, your making settlements, your First Nations, and my municipalities. When you put that into there, plus you've got the 5 school boards, you've got hospitals, each one of my constituencies, and every one of my major centers. I've got Portage College. Like, when you put all of that, our brothers and sisters that are MLAs in the Edmonton, Calgary, probably have a fraction of that they're trying to deal with. And I'm, again, not saying that they don't have challenges, but when it comes to rural, I would suggest that it's a different dynamic that needs to be recognized. So to answer you, I think that we need to revisit how we fund it. That was a recommendation that came out of the first Boundary Commission, is if we're going to be giving them larger constituencies to deal with larger populations, then we should be reviewing what the rural constituencies are getting. That never happened. And that's not within your mandate. You can recommend it, but in the end, if this is something that you see, it would sure be nice to see what is it that the commission would see as fair. I would say that when it comes down to it, I have 2 staff, they're going nonstop. I'm getting to events everywhere, and people seem to be feeling as if they're represented, like what Councillor Crick was saying. But again, for me, I try to get to all of my councils semi-annually, so twice a year, which is kind of lining up with what Josh was saying. Same thing with my school boards, same thing with my hospital administrators. My RCMP offices, I think you forget about them too. I go and sit with my staff sergeants at the offices, hearing what their concerns are. I sit with the prosecutor's offices, what resources that I can help advocate on their behalf, because again, not influencing casework. That is not what I'm suggesting. What I'm saying is that is there unique challenges to our area? And so when you put all that into perspective, money definitely would help, but I'm sure that's an ask for every MLA, whether they're in Edmonton or Calgary or rural.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Steer. I've got a couple of questions and maybe an assignment. Just out of curiosity, the carbon capture project for St. Paul, is that similar to what Saskatchewan has been doing for some time in the Estevan area?
Yeah, we've got carbon capture in Alberta.
Yeah.
What that is a saline solution. They put the carbon into the carbon dioxide into it. They push it down a pipeline and then inject it into the ground.
Yeah.
Very safe. I know that some people are concerned. There's some fallacies out there that if there's a breach in the pipeline, it's going to kill everybody in a 100-kilometer radius. That is not the case with this. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't want my face over a pipeline break, but I am saying it's very safe and effective.
But that's not started yet.
So the Minister Jean has been very clear that we're ready with our tier program. We've been waiting for our federal partners to get online, which is why I'm saying that with former Prime Minister Trudeau, it didn't seem like he had an interest in carbon capture. But our current Prime Minister has shown interest. So suddenly this went from a back burner to probably one of the forefront.
Okay.
And again, our government is trying to work with Prime Minister Carney in every way possible.
Okay. Well, let me maybe describe, and of course, you're a rural riding with some very unique challenges in quotation marks which lead to growth. Okay, which many other rural ridings don't have. I would ask you to come up with a bit more information, because what you told us, it came out a little bit in your written presentation, but I think we're just somewhat taken aback by all the growth industries and the projects and things like that. And if you could come up with something to send us in terms of the economic potential, the growth patterns, in a little bit more concrete way, that would be helpful for us to chew on. That's the one thing. And secondly, you've done great work in your presentation, but I'd just like to get the numbers explained a little bit.
Yeah.
Compared to the numbers you have, and look at the numbers that we're using, and maybe have your people take a second look at it. I'm not saying yours are wrong and ours are right. I'm just saying, you know, every census is wrong the minute it's published. So we just need to kind of square that circle a bit. And obviously your staff has worked already on it.
Right. So I don't know what your breakdown is, and then.
Well, the numbers, the breakdown I can't give you here.
I'm saying that because if I can compare
Apples to apples.
right now, we actually went municipality by municipality. Right now, you're giving me a lump and saying mine's not great.
Yeah, okay.
So you can see where that's awkward.
We could probably, we can get granular on our number, right, sir? Yeah, so we can get that. I just, because it's somewhat of a significant difference, we need to talk the same language.
I just want to add to your comments, if you don't mind, is that we are bound by these numbers. And it is because the census is right across Canada, and we're not going to mix up different numbers. So unless something was glaringly incorrect, that is the number for this riding.
So again, if there is something that we've double counted inside my numbers, like you got to remember, I've got an MD that's been counted as huge. Maybe some of the St. Paul got in there. So if I could take a look at where you're at, and we can look at ours, and then what happens is if there's an error on my side, I can send a correction. And sure, and again,
so we'll delegate to Aaron the work from Elections Alberta staff additions, but keep in mind, Election Alberta is very busy right now. But I think we just need to have a little exchange of information. So yeah, we'll do what we can to get something, and then you respond.
Can I add to that? The census that we're relying on, our date is July 1st, 2024.
Yes, that should have been.
Because the Act allows us to supplement the federal census numbers by any other reliable form of census that can be distributed across all the electoral districts. So we've done that, and we've come up with a stable and reliable figure, and so we've chosen July 2024. Now, obviously, population has grown since then, but is it stable and reliable as a figure? Because people come and go, people are born and die. Census is never empirical, it's always an estimate. But so what we're talking about here is about a significant variation across the numbers. Now, you will be able to find in Elections Alberta online and other sources from our provincial government, the municipal census for each year. And I don't know for the life of me what day in that year they choose, but you can see ways to approximate the figures to the ones that you yourself have collected. And it would be on that basis. I'd say that was your preliminary research when you're trying to look at your population figures.
Thank you. And again, once I get your figures and how you calculated it, I can compare it to ours to see if, let's say, for instance, a First Nation was counted twice or overlooked.
Or not,
Then what happens, we can send it in along with the request of the economic potential for our area. Yeah. And again, if there's an error on my side, I apologize to the commission.
No, I don't mean to
No,
say it, you're wrong.
No, and I'm not suggesting that you are. I'm just saying that if there is an inconsistency, you have my apologies. I'm not here to misinform. I'm just trying to make sure that, that I'm communicating it correctly, and if it's not correct,
I
want
think
to correct it for the record.
you know, don't apologize. If you and your staff chose to include figures from July 1st, 2024 until today, that would be perfectly reasonable, but we're not allowed to listen.
Well, my understanding is when we did the calculation, it was on the 2021 census as well.
That's the baseline, yeah.
So if anything, your number should be higher than my numbers, not lower.
We'll look into it. That's an interesting question.
So I will dig into where the inconsistency is. And again, I have faith in the good men and women that are building your numbers.
So if you, and I'm wanting to allow you to sign off here, we've drilled you enough. If we accepted your suggestion in terms of cutting off the southwest corner of your district, the name would still be satisfactory. One of our jobs is we always forget, we have to name the electoral district. So please say the name's fine.
The name will be fine. Actually, the first boundary commission hadn't asked that question, and I actually had to move an amendment to.
Oh, you were one of the 5 or 6 writings that had to be moved.
Well, just to renamed, yeah. Because Bonnyville, they had Cold Lake St. Paul was the original. So this is a self-inflicted wound. The name, it's a really long name, Bonnyville, Cold Lake St. Paul. But what I will say is that the name is sufficient.
Well, we appreciate all presenters, but we are particularly gratified to have members of the legislature come and talk to us and give us their thoughts and recommendations, because you travel this electoral district. You know, you beat the pavement, and so we are very grateful, and thank you for your presentation and your written material. And as a result, the good student gets more work, so I'm giving you an assignment.
So is there anything more specific that I would send the response to?
Aaron will give you a start, yeah.
I've already got Aaron.
Yeah,
okay. So I've already got Aaron.
Yeah, he works 36 hours a day, so don't worry.
I know.
Piling him more work on him, yeah.
And he was actually, for when we were in session there, he was one of our table officers. God bless him. While we were sitting there, while the opposition was filibustering, he got to hear it all.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
So thank you.
But by the way, yesterday, we were in West Lawn, and it was kind of gratifying when your colleague presented, and then we had, a few other presenters, but former Minister Hoffman came and sat in to the hearing. So it was kind of nice to see them talk in a very collegial way and have a little bit of dialogue after. And I was thinking after, we maybe should compel some urban MLAs to come in the country to present and compel rural MLAs to go to the city to present. So you have a little bit of cross-pollination.
I'll present on all of them. If they wanted again, what I will say, and this is where our sympathies are with our big urban, if you will, is I can't fully understand what the challenges of Edmonton are, because I don't live in Edmonton.
Right.
The same thing with Calgary, and even Medicine Hat. I can't understand the challenges over Lethbridge, what their challenges are. But I can maybe give a perspective of Northeast.
Yeah, and you've done a very good job of that. Thank you.
So,
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're not leaving right away either, if anybody wants to chat.